Flat Earth. There we go, Flat Earth. Do you see my stamping I've created? Flat Earth. Yeah, that looks dope, huh? I rather dig it. I rather dig that shit. I think it looks legit. Flat Earth. Yes. This is one of my old paintings. Reasons why flat earthers don't go back to the globe. First reason. Gravity. I'm just kidding. First reason is because there's no proof of the globe. The proofs that were offered were more like evidences that could be interpreted in more than one way, which is pretty fishy science. Like the sunset. Well, yeah, it looks like the sun is setting below the horizon. But how could that be? We know the sun isn't going into the earth. So the only explanation could be that it's going behind the earth. And the only way that could work is if the earth was, because it comes back up again over here. It's going around the earth. But what's it doing while it's gone? Maybe earth is a big ball. Okay, well, if that was the case, then when the sun starts to sink below the horizon, it's below a physical curve of earth. So it wouldn't stand to reason that we could zoom back in on the sun with our camera and bring the gap between the horizon and the sun back into view. That wouldn't be something you could do. So that debunks that one. And now there's plenty of evidences we can go through that they've provided as to reasons why the earth is known to be a globe for 2,500 years. The ships over the horizon, the same thing. It's like you see a ship sinking over the horizon, and what you think is looking like it's sinking over curvature and it's being blocked by curvature. Well, you do the same thing. You pull out your Nikon P100, P1000. That's what I got. There's P900, dude. I have the P1000. And you can zoom back in on the boat. So it didn't really go over any curvature. So that debunks that one. All right, let's see what else we got here. Well, I don't recall them giving us a whole lot of ways to prove the globe. They just told us that it's true, that there's upside down people and gravity makes it all work. Nobody's upside down, even though on a ball, the outside of a ball, theoretically, if people were living on the outside of a ball, there would be people that are upside down in reference to each other and sideways, and that's just duh. Of course there would be. But somehow that all gets worked out by this force called gravity. It's interesting though. It's a force that we can't. It's the results of this force. You know, allowing us to exist on the outside of a ball without any of us noticing that it's a ball. Like we all feel like we're on a flat stationary plane. However, according to the accepted globe model, it's like even though it appears to be flat, it's actually a ball. We would have to leave this reference point to really know that, though. So we left this reference point back in the 70s and late 60s. We went to the moon, right? Well, the moon landing has been exposed as being a total fraud. It's a hoax. It was it's a fraud. And if you want to believe it's true, well, all you have to do is go produce the evidence from the moon landing and show it to me. Like I need you to provide me with the yeah, I want to see the blueprints of all the stuff that was made, all the technology they used to get to the moon, the 60s and early 70s technology that was used to get to the moon and back. I want to see the telemetry data that was created from that journey. I want to see the the plans for like how those spacesuits were created, how those spacesuits managed to keep them safe in a supposed vacuum that's a stronger or whatever. It's a more of a vacuum than what we've been able to recreate here on Earth, on the surface of Earth. We haven't even been able to create a vacuum that's to the same specs of what they claim the moon has. So I just want to see the plans for the spacesuits and see what I want to know the nitty gritty on all that shit. And like I just want to see the stuff they use to get there. Like I want to put my hands on it and see it and like go inside of it and check it out. And, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. I want to see the original like I want to comb through all the footage that they took and all the pictures and I just want to see all the data. I want to see all the stuff they used. Oh, it's missing? Oh, well, that's interesting. So then that's pretty much just it's a moot point. If you want to tell me that something's true and you can't provide any of the evidence that would have been the result of that being true, like you achieve something that monumental, you would you would assume that all the data that you gathered from said mission would be like in a safe place and it would have been stored somewhere that would have been able to maintain its its presence, and yet that stuff disappeared unfortunately, so we have no real proof of that anymore. So it's interesting that you know the folks that want to make us believe that we live on a globe would go so far out of their way to like hoax us into thinking that we've seen the earth from space when in reality it was more of an elaborate hoax. We haven't really seen the earth from space. Those pictures were not real. You can believe they were real if you want, but here we're just left having to take someone at their word, and the government, no less. Why would an entity that known as the government, which basically means mind control, govern, and why would they want us to, why would they try to make us convinced of something? Why would an entity known as mind control want us to be convinced of something? Oh well, we'll worry about that later. So, and now they got this space station, they have these girls that put all this hairspray in their hair and make it look like it's floating, although it doesn't really look like it's floating. It looks more like it's hairsprayed and it's kind of like stuck in a really ugly hairdo. So, it looks more like there's people with ugly hairdos and really awkward like mannerisms and really clean clothes that are ironed perfectly and they're very well clean shaven and very well groomed and just smiling from ear to ear. Shirts tucked in, big old belts, just arms folded. Talking they're inside a tin can that's flying around Earth for fucking, they're up there for months at a time in a cramped situation where it's like things are floating around. I mean, I bet it'd be pretty hard to maintain your well-groomed look and your smiley demeanor. I think it would get a little bit crazy, a little bit hectic. I think it's fake, and I think we've seen enough evidence of that being fake to really, I can confidently make the claim that whatever is going on up there, I know we see something flying around, we can actually see what they say is the ISS or whatever, but like as far as what they present to us, as far as what's taking place on that thing, well, those videos are fake. Those, that's I would I would like confidently make that claim. I feel like I could almost prove it in a court of law with the evidence that we've gathered as the flat Earth community or whatever you want to call it. And so this gets to be to where like there's enough fraudulent bullshit being hurled at us in regards to the globe Earth that after you get into this deep enough, you realize to go back to the globe, you're going to have to eat a lot of shit. You're going to have to just swallow a bunch of horse shit. And you just have to. Even though you know it's shit, you're going to have to eat it. And that's why most flat earthers don't go back. Because it's like, wow, we've seen too much shit. We have to go and eat all that shit to get back on the globe. And it's just not, it doesn't sound like a very attractive endeavor. I don't really like eating shit personally. And I've seen enough shit. It's a lot of shit you got to eat. I mean, we could go on for hours talking about all the deception. I mean, there's so much deception when it comes to the globe Earth. And there's so much evidence of it being like an occultic, it's like there's a lot of like sort of dark shit. I mean, Jack Parsons and like his connection to Aleister Crowley and like the fact that NASA was basically started by Satanists and Nazis, and it's just that sort of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And then when you look at all the space presentations and all the fucking people that work at these places, where they're like cheering, "Yay, we finally landed something on the moon." I mean, they just look so dumb. The things they say are never. It's always so vague. Like when you hear an astronaut being interviewed, they always say the most vague. Like you're never left with anything to sink your teeth into. It's just so like howdy doody, like just so phony. They never inspire a sense of awe in me. They always make me look at them like, that's it. Like I want more. I want it to make sense. I want to know more about the spacesuit. You're doing these spacewalks in your fucking pressurized suit. I want to know why the astronauts on the moon would have run and jumped and frolicked and played like little children, wee, and with no concern about their spacesuit failing, as it would result in a horrible death. You'd be fucking. It's the most horrifying death you could imagine. The temperatures on the moon are just like the alleged temperatures on the moon are fucking hardcore. It's like 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And then like negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like, that's pretty extreme. You wouldn't last very long in that situation. And it would be pretty horrific, dude. I would think you'd be a little more cautious, swinging golf clubs, hitting golf balls, fucking running around, singing, dancing, playing, like I don't think that would be the demeanor you'd be carrying yourself. Like driving a fucking go-kart around, a little golf cart or whatever, hitting golf balls, driving a golf cart, sticking the flag in the ground. Well, they treat the place like it's a golf course. That's not really very scientific, if you ask me. Those guys back in the 60s, they were kind of crazy. But what I'd like to say about this is like, even if I was shown like sufficient proof that the Earth is a globe, I would still be stuck having to go, well, I'm not going to eat all this other shit that I've witnessed. I'm not going to go and eat all that shit. I might admit the Earth is a globe because I've seen it now. But I'm still left scratching my head like, why was there all this shit that we have to eat now to go back to the globe? Why did you have to impose so much fraudulent hoax garbage shit on us? Like, why? Because I think that's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so, like, that's why you end up landing in the flat Earth camp, because you're like, well, all that shit's bogus. I can't stand by that shit. I'm not gonna like vouch that that I've looked at it critically and it passes. Like I can't do that. I won't do that. And so that's why it's nearly impossible for anyone to go back to the globe if you're truly a flat earther, which means you've done all the research, you've looked at all the information. Well, I mean, there's always more information to look at, but I'm saying like it takes a few years to go through all of it, all the different angles, all the different science, and all the different pseudoscience that you've been led to believe is just fact. You start to realize like it's it's like pulling on a thread. You eventually unravel the whole sweater and you're just left with flat earth. I mean, I don't know what this place, I don't know what it looks outside of my experience. I can't You're left with just having to go on your own experience pretty much, because it's like, well, that was a bunch of bullshit. Like if I had to just be 100% honest about what my experience and how I treat the earth, how I interact with the earth where we live, I just have to tell you that that's a stationary plane. Outside of that, there might be some crazy physics and other crazy things going on that I can't quite comprehend. I'm not going to claim that there's anything other than what I'm experiencing going on. Why would I do that? I mean, that'd be silly. Well, actually, the Earth is rising up at a constant rate. That's what creates our weight and the vector and all this shit. I'm like, well, that's just for people that that want to get all technical. For me, like, I'm just gonna say, hey, you can treat the Earth like it's a stationary plane, and you'll be good to go. Like when someone's training you how to fly a jet airplane and how to land a jet airplane and how to manage one, like what they tell you is treat the Earth like it's flat and stationary, like it's a flat and stationary plane. That's what they tell you because that's what it is. if that's how if you're doing something serious like flying a jet airplane, you know, taking off and landing one, flying one, like that's when it gets down to brass tacks. It's when you need to know like exactly what you're working with here. When it comes, because that's a pretty serious situation. And and if that's how you're trained to operate one of those vehicles is to like treat the Earth as though it were a stationary plane, well then it stands to reason that you could come away from that just saying, well, the Earth is a stationary plane. I mean, because that's how I have to treat it when I'm landing my jet airplane, and that's a pretty serious situation. There's no time for fucking around or like, you know, spitting some fucking information that's basically a moot point. You could say all this other stuff, it's curving and spinning and it's doing all this shit, but it's like when it comes to like actually doing something for real in the real world where you gotta like land a jet airplane, you can just go ahead and forget all that other shit because it's not, you don't have to account for it. So therefore, it's what we call a moot point. I know all that information, and if that's what you want, I can recite it all for you, probably better than your average person because I've studied this stuff now. But I won't claim that I think that's what's really going on. What I'll claim is that it's information that I would call a moot point because you don't need to account for it. You don't have to factor it into how you live your life. It's useless information. And and so that's why I'd have a hard time going back to the globe because then I'm gonna have to like, you know, I'm gonna have to go ahead and like claim some shit that like I'm not busy experiencing myself. I'm gonna have to go ahead and just like spout off a bunch of useless information. It's just like, well, that's fun, like let's have a conversation about some shit that we'll never have to concern ourselves over. I mean, it's just like more like fucking, campfire stories or something. It's pointless, really. It's like it's to no avail. I mean, now if you're an astronaut, on the other hand, well, now you got to start worrying about that shit. Oh yeah, astronauts are liars. Oh, they're heroes, Dr. Benton. Nah, get out of here with that hero shit. A hero has to do something for somebody, you know? A hero has to, like, risk their own well being to, like, to save to make someone's, to help, you know? Like, I'm sorry, but a person who's doing somersaults on a fucking vomit comet, pretending they're, in space, and like, That's not very heroic to me. It's just kind of like a joke. Nothing about that strikes me as being heroic. It's more like just retarded. Yeah. And that's what I like to say to people who want to come at me sideways or just call me an idiot because I don't believe in whatever. I don't believe in stuff that I'm not experiencing. I just come at them like, you know what? Hey, at the end of the day, they have to treat this place as though it were the place they say I'm crazy for thinking that it is. And I find that to be amusing. At the end of the day, they have to treat this place as though it were the place they say we're crazy for thinking that it is. They say we're crazy for thinking that it is. Well, what is it? Apparently not what it appears to be. Like, really, if you just want to be honest, you're just gonna have to like just say it how it is. Like, how do you experience the earth? How is your relationship with the earth? What is it? What do you know about your experience with the earth? Like, if you had to explain to someone who had never been here before, like what to expect from this place, and like how to account for it, and how to know how to adjust into this place, like you would just be like, well, don't stress. It's a vast stationary plane. It's not going anywhere. It's been right here the whole time. There's a bunch of crazy cool looking shit that circles around overhead. It's like on the most precise rhythm, anybody's ever known. All clocks and calendars have been modeled around what the sky is doing. There's clearly some motion going on, but it appears to be up in the sky, not down here. Now, of course, it's possible that it's all in motion, but that's kind of a stretch of the imagination, really, because you're not busy experiencing that so much as like where you have to be worried about that. Like, oh, the Earth is flying. Like, what if it runs into something? What if there's some turbulence, or like, oh, it's flying through a frictionless vacuum. Well, it's a pretty grandiose claim. Where's the evidence of that? Oh, space. I'm sorry, but when I look into the sky at night, I don't get the impression that we're flying through a frictionless vacuum. No, it doesn't give me that impression at all. Especially considering that the 50 years that I've been here almost, the stars and all the constellations and everything, it looks the same as it did when I was a kid. It's unchanging, It's like there's a rhythm to it, yeah, but it's just unchanging. My experience doesn't give me the impression that we're flying through a haphazard, like frictionless vacuum. I mean, there's a reason why they tell you all this shit's so freaking far away, so their story can almost work. But with all those distances in mind, you have to assume that there's no way they could really know that because they haven't been there. It's a distance that's impossible for anything to have ever traveled that far. It's a crock of shit. I mean, it's mathematics. That's the only proof of the globe they have is mathematics. And that's not science, bro. That's math. There's a reason why that's a separate course. You take math and you take science. Those are two different classes you take. You can can use math to try to explain science, but that doesn't mean that math is science. You know? But now we're just getting into semantics and bullshit. The only thing I want to say here is there's a reason why I won't go back to the globe. It's because I don't like eating shit. Since it costs a lot to win and even more to lose, you and me are bound to spend some time wondering what to choose. Goes to show you don't ever know. Watch each card you play and play it slow. Wait until that deal go down. Don't you let that deal go down. Oh no. Yeah, so anyways. What's up, Lev? Nice to see you. You're the only guy here. I just got finished listing off all the reasons why a flat earther has a hard time going back to the globe and why it pretty much never happens. And I'll summarize for you. It's because there's a lot of shit you have to eat to go back to the globe, and most people don't like eating shit. When you're a flat earther, you've witnessed a lot of shit. It's stuff that you wouldn't have noticed until you fucking investigated. Once you realize that the whole space travel presentation is just a fucking cheap hoax, just a low budget joke, it's pretty hard to go back and just be like, okay, I accept that as being real now that I know that it's not. I mean, to go back to the globe, like you'd have to eat so much shit, and you could maybe do it somewhat gracefully and be like, okay, well, the Earth must be a globe, but whatever they did to try to prove and show us that was not real. They can't show us the globe because it's not possible, which kind of makes you wonder why you would think it's a globe in the first place then at that point. You can go back to the globe to avoid ridicule, but it's nothing to do with science. When it comes down to it, like, you know, it's pretty much like good luck replicating God's creation. That's what I got to say about that. Like, you want to understand exactly what's going on here? Well, talk to God. You know, not one person will know the whole story, and there's no way to know the whole story. It's like you can't replicate God's creation, is what I'm trying to say. We can try to figure it out. There's nothing wrong with that, but like, I don't think that we'll ever really fully know, and I'm okay with that. You know, the whole thing with the final experiment. It's like I think Jaren's pretty pretty dead on, really. I mean, I don't like all the politics of the whole mess. It's you know, personally, I don't like it when people start calling each other names and belittling each other based on what they're saying or what their level of intellect is or whatever. It's like I don't think, well, for one thing, I don't think a really smart person or just a person who's like a truth seeker, I don't think they really need to be getting, you know, getting all caught up in like this sort of like I'm cooler than you or you know this like competition. It's like that's just some childish. It's child's play, you know. Like you don't need to like make people feel smaller. There's no that doesn't help you in your exploration of truth. That's not the point. Like, and so I don't stand behind anybody that's busy doing that. Like, but I think Jaron is correct when he says like that if there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, that does throw into question a lot of the things that we've been thinking here as flat earthers. And I personally don't think there is a 24-hour sun down there, although there's a lot of people now that are saying they think there's evidence of it now. But like I just think the way this is all played out is highly sus, because there was zero proof of it before flat earth came along. And I think it was Jaron actually that pointed it out. There's no videos of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica. There's zero. And at the time, like I remember that. I remember looking for it. There wasn't any. But after it was brought to light, well, now the videos start showing up. And it's like I think that's highly sus. It's not like Antarctica is someplace that your average Joe can just go. You need a lot of money, and you need to go through all this government clearance and whatever. I mean, it's not cut out for like it's not a situation where it's easy for anyone to go verify for themselves, and that alone is just highly suspect too. But you could just say there's reasons for that because it's cold and it's far away or whatever. But it's been made a situation where it's hard for anyone to go down there and actually witness this supposed 24-hour sun. And there's a lot of evidence that we've looked over that suggests that it's not there. For instance, the webcams from the fucking government base, they're like the science, Scott Amundsen base or whatever. They have yet to show one video of a 24-hour sun. All their videos have 8 hours removed from them. So that's just kind of suspect. Sure, there's other videos of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica now. There are videos of it. But I think it's weird that they didn't show up until after we pointed out that there wasn't any. I think that's very strange. It's just really interesting timing. I pay attention to the subtleties like that. Like for me at this point, I'd have to go down there and see it myself to believe it, because it just doesn't seem like that's what we would have going on there. It makes more sense to me that the sun is circling, since we can see a circling sun in the north, right? I mean, I don't know why people are even arguing about the circling sun. Isn't that what we witness when we're in the north at a certain time of year, where it's like the sun circles around you? How can you say there's no circling sun if that's what's been witnessed? My dad has lived up there in Alaska. He saw that. I don't know. That's where it starts getting confusing, and I just realized that, like, that's not even really. I don't need to get myself all caught up in all that confusion. My experience is that of a stationary plane. I'm willing to say, hey, there might be other stuff going on, but it's nothing that's going to change my experience. My experience is just this. It's never been any different. If there's other stuff going on, well, I'd have to tell you that it's pretty much a moot point, because you don't have to really concern yourself with that. If I say it's a stationary plane, you can factor that into your aviation and it's like the kind of information that I think flat and stationary Earth is important information, because that's what you're working with. Curving, rotating, flying Earth, that's information that you don't need to know, because you don't have to account for that. You're not experiencing that. There's nothing nothing about all that information that you need to work into your life and be knowledgeable of in order to survive here. It's a moot point. So I see no reason to be filling my mind with moot points and spewing moot points as though it meant something. It might make you seem smart to know a bunch of moot points. But the people that have actually done the research and looked into all of this, I'm not impressed by people spitting all that shit anymore. It's just embarrassing for me. If I see somebody who thinks they're smart because they know a bunch of globe information, I can't help myself. Sometimes I have to just interrupt and be like, hey, let me ask you a question. Do you think a person's property they own, like a piece of land, how would you measure how much land you own? If you owned a parcel of land, how would you figure out how much land is in your possession? Seems kind of off subject, but okay, let's see. Well, you would have to go measure the perimeter of your property, right? Get the measurements for the dimensions of what the perimeter of your property is. Go find the property line and measure it out, and then we'll take that information and will deduce how much area is within the perimeter of your property. That's how you do it. So it's safe to say that the perimeter of your property is in direct relation with how much property you own. That's fact. I don't think there's any anomalies to that fact. You have to get someone to agree with you. Is there any way that could not be true? Well, I don't think so. I think pretty much if you want to know how much property you own, you're going to have to measure the perimeter and then do some math and figure out how much area is within that perimeter. Sometimes it might be complicated, because of what shape the perimeter is, but like ultimately, there's no other way to do it. That's how you do. That's how you figure out how much area is that you own. Like when it comes to owning land. So I think it's pretty much a rule of thumb that we can say there's no anomalies to this rule. The perimeter of your property is in direct relation to how much property you own within that perimeter. There's never going to be a time when that isn't the case. Is that right? Okay, yeah, that seems to be correct. I think that's a pretty like airtight claim to make. All right. And does it matter how much property you have now? Like big or small or just fucking massive? I mean, is there ever going to be a time like, based on how much property you have, where this rule that I've already established isn't going to be applicable? That's where people might start getting kind of confused. Why? No. Why would there be a time? Like, why would it matter how big it is? It's always going to be the same situation. You're measuring the perimeter of property to find out how much property is within that perimeter. Like, I don't see why it matters how big or how small it is. Okay, well, let's say that you own the area known as the entire northern hemisphere. That's a lot of land to own, but that's still the same idea. You're going to have to go and measure out a perimeter around that whole area. It's a lot of work, but we're working. It's the same thing. It's like we're just going to go to the place known as the equator, and you're going to have to go and mark that whole circumference, right? 24,000 miles, and whatever's north of that is your property, right? I mean, it's the same rule. You're just going to go measure out your perimeter and then do some math, and you'll figure out how much area you own within that perimeter. Now, let's say you want to add more property to your northern hemisphere. Well, you step outside of that property. Now you're standing in the southern hemisphere, the area known as the southern hemisphere. Now you're going to have to measure a new property line because you stepped outside of your property. Now I'm gonna buy more properties, so you need to start measuring a new property line around the outside of your other one, which was the equator. Step outside of your property. Now you make a new perimeter around your new property. All right, so it's all the way around the whole entire equator. You measured out a new property line all the way around the equator. Came back to where you started. Just added. It was only a few feet of property, but it's going 24,000 miles around, so it ends up being a lot more property that you added. Are you following me so far? So now you have a new perimeter to measure, and you're going to do the math to figure out how much property is within that circle. Okay, well, now your new perimeter is shorter than the one you had before. No, but I added more property. Yeah. But now your property line is shorter. How are you fitting more property inside a smaller perimeter? I thought we established that rule that your perimeter is in direct relation to how much property you own. How are you fitting more property inside a smaller perimeter? Here's the thing, you're not. You wouldn't get a smaller perimeter, but they want you to think that you would because you live on a globe. But in reality, an outward expanding perimeter is only going to grow in size. There's never going to come a time when you can go measure out a smaller circle around the outside of a circle on the ground, You draw a circle on the ground. Can you draw a smaller circle around the outside of it? Nope. That seems pretty impossible to do. Doesn't matter how big that circle is. Why the fuck would it? No, You're never going to be able to draw a smaller circle around the outside of another circle on the ground. So it doesn't matter how big that first circle is, you're never going to be able to draw a smaller circle around the outside of that circle. Nope, you're never going to. Unless you live on a globe. But how's that going to look? Like, that's where it gets kind of tricky. Like, that's pretty much what we're supposed to believe. Like, at a certain point, you're going to be able to draw a smaller circle around the outside of another circle. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's shit that I will not eat. I can't eat that shit. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to. I don't want to be okay with things that don't make sense. I don't want to just allow that to be something that's. I don't want to allow that unless I can like see it. Honestly, that's what made me. That's what led me to be a flat earther. Really, it wasn't anyone's video that I watched. Although the videos that I watched helped me go down that rabbit hole, so to speak. But like, I didn't fully embrace, or I didn't fully leave the globe behind until I sat and I had that epiphany all by myself without. There was nobody's video I was watching. I was just sitting there meditating on the whole thing. I'm thinking, well, the globe model would have us believe that an outward expanding perimeter eventually starts to shrink until it brings you back down on the other end of the world. Like, that's what the latitude lines are implying. The circles, they start at this North Pole and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you get down to the equator, and now you're going to start making smaller circles, but you're on the other side of the ball, and they're leading you back down to the South Pole. But like in reality, how's that going to work? If you had to go mark those circles, the latitude lines, circles on the ground, or on the ocean, or wherever you were on the surface of the Earth, like there's going to be a time when you're going to measure out a smaller circle, because your circle is going to get bigger and bigger until you get to the equator. Like on a globe Earth, the biggest circle you can make on the surface of the Earth is at the equator, 24,000 miles around. That's the biggest circle you can make on Earth. However, there's more Earth past that. This is too hard for most people to even like. Most people won't even fucking humor this conversation to this point. But like, that's what led me to be like just completely like over the idea of living on a globe. I'm thinking, really, if you start to spiral out from any one spot you're standing in, that spiral you're making should only get bigger. How's it going to get smaller? Like, if you're just following a simple formula, you're traveling around the outside of the last lap you made. So every lap you make is bigger. You're just traveling in a spiral. How are you going to make a smaller lap? How are you going to start spiraling back in? Like, you're just traveling around the outside of your last lap you made. You're always going to be doing that. That's how this works. You're making a spiral. Every time you go around, it's a bigger lap, a bigger lap. How are you ever going to start making smaller laps? That you just have to sort of accept. It's kind of like thinking, well, like if I fell all the way through Earth, I'd come out upside down on the other end. Well, no, that's not what. Nobody's upside down. Well, you just have to accept this like garbage idea. Well, it doesn't make sense, but it's just how it is. See, that's where I fall off. I'm just like, well, if it doesn't make sense, then that's not how it is. If that's how it is and it doesn't make sense, well, that sucks. There's got to be a better explanation. Because I'm used to things kind of making sense. I mean, there is a point where you kind of have to fall off. We're like, well, we're made up of particles that are all, charged electrons, and it gets down to a point where it's like, well, how did all those things come into existence? And like, you just start like picking apart everything. Why is this? Why is that? Why? How come? Why? And you get down to the bottom. There is no bottom. Why is there no bottom? Because you can just keep asking why all the way down. It never stops. So if you look at reality in that way, yeah, it's kind of like it almost doesn't really make sense beyond a certain point. Like our scope is only so far, but it keeps going. We just can't perceive it. How many times can you cut something in half? You cut the penny in half, cut the half in half, cut that half in half, and you just keep cutting things in half. You can just go forever. Between point A and point B, there's infinity. You know, I'm traveling halfway to point B. Okay, and now I'm traveling halfway from there to point B. You'll never get to point B if you just keep going half the way there. At a certain point, you'll barely be moving, but you'll never get to point B. If you're just traveling half the distance between you and then you travel half that distance, and then you travel half that distance, you'll never get there. It's that kind of shit that makes sense but doesn't make sense. Sorry, I'm out of cigarettes. It's kind of a desperate situation. I don't even know why I went live. I don't even know why I went live. I should have gone dead. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Take your load off. I forget all the words. Crazy Chester followed me. Rags to riches, to riches to rags. Rags to riches to riches to rags. Rags to riches to riches to rags. The quickest to brag, it's a pat on his back. The quickest to pat the back, the get rich quick gets the benefit. It's the benefit when nothing but half of the full spectrum positively pure potential gets neglected and rejected while cobwebs collected. I get affected, but I still will fly up in your face. I'm high. How are you? Hung up. I found to be visibly, physically bone dry. Your fixations are evasive in the end. They just get lost in a stream of like-minded bad ideas that just run off the solid matter of fact, like that, down into the big drink where all water sinks down to its own level, way below the notion of my musical emotion that can sit there in the air above your ocean of despair, where collective cynicism, negative organisms are swimming in them, red tide ripping them up and spitting them out. Spare me from the glare, I'm aware you're down there, ambivalent but living it, blatantly benign, denied, defunct, defunct. Oh well, floating is better than being sunk. It's better than being sunk. Rags to riches to rags. Rags to riches to rags. Rags to riches to rags. The quickest to brag, it's a pat on his back. The quickest to pat the back, the cat rich quick gets the benefit. Oh shit, that's what you get. I shit you not. That's what you got. It's a cheap shot. It's a cheap shot. There's a big wig where the wicked sit in the cockpit of the ship. The ship, they steer the ship, they steer the ship. The shit they get away with is despicable. Ooh, I got him. Ha! See what happens? I'm fly. Landing on my hand. Looks like I've lost my audience. Well, I don't blame you for not wanting to watch my boring ass. Dr. Bass, Dr. Boring Ass.